them. They're not there.
Which book did you read this week, John?
They're not there.
I have too many. I just don't know which one to use.
It's funny, the one book says Clifford the Big Red Dog.
That's a good book.
So I'm not sure you're challenging yourself all that much, John.
I'll hit that another year.
That's right.
Got to do the easy ones first.
I recommend Junie B. Jones. Those are my favorites.
My kids love that.
When do they start reading those? What grade?
Now, you can do it now.
Okay.
Yeah, they're hysterical.
Because I used to read Judy Blume books. They're not the cleanest books.
Oh no, it's not like that. They're not like that.
Now we know why Jen
Oh.
is.
So just before this goes too far, are we recording?
We are.
Okay.
Too late. Sorry, Jen.
All right, I have to call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag, of the United States of America,
And
To the
to
republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so hybrid part 2. I think what I've been thinking a lot about our decision and where it should, when it should be done. I think a decision of this level really should be made at or voted on at our regular board meeting. I think it's October 7, Cheryl, 6.
6.
So that gives us a couple meetings where we can, figure out if there's anything else we need to know, anything else we need to do. It still gives us about a month to implement it and, if it makes any changes. So just so anybody listening in the public, whatever, we're going to hold that decision until our actual board meeting and not do it during a workshop. Because I also want to make sure that as best I can, I have the full board there. All right?
So no, I thought we were going through some concerns we had initially that you asked us all to take some time and, type up your questions and concerns, and we still have not made it through all the various subjects to address those concerns.
Oh, no. Don't get me wrong, John. I wasn't saying, let's cut it off. I think we need more time before we can make a decision like that. Am I missing?
Yes.
I'm confused then. Go ahead.
Well, unless some of those questions have weight on the decision, if they do, then why would we be doing a decision before we get through things?
I'm assuming if we haven't gotten through it by that board meeting, we'll push it out to the second board meeting in October.
Laura, does your schedule wrap up by October 2nd?
Well,
The schedule for these work sessions, I think, wrapped up on the 4th, I think.
Okay.
and there were some that might have already been embedded, like there was absenteeism was one component, but social emotional, we definitely want to bring, to focus on. And then there was CTE, there was bilingual. So there were multiple smaller components. So we can continue work sessions and combine some of them together.
Yeah, my assumption, John, was that number one, we get through all these sessions between now and that board meeting.
Okay.
That we have all those questions answered between now and that board meeting. I mean, if we're at the 6th of October and we still have fundamental issues open, we're not going to.
That sounds fair. I didn't know it's wrapping that quick.
Yep. All right.
Which is fine.
All right. So why don't you guys take it away?
Okay. Good evening, Millbrook. Again, I'm excited to continue our hybrid conversation with the board. During our last BOE work session, we shared the hybrids that were explored by the reentry subcommittees over the summer. Board members expressed interest in learning more about what it would take to provide full in-person instruction for various grade configurations, while other grades either remain remote except for students with disabilities or an AARBB schedule. We were totally up for the challenge and spent this past week walking the buildings and really drilling down on procedures such as who and what does it really take to monitor a student's temperature and ensure students and families completed the daily health screener before entering our buildings. We also played out scenarios to help determine staff needs. For instance, if a teacher presents COVID-related symptoms at the door, who's going to cover that class? What if 2 teachers show up in the same building with symptoms? Or what if a student exhibits COVID-related symptoms in school? Where do we move the rest of the class so we can disinfect the classroom? And of course, we considered costs. So tonight we're prepared to share optimal considerations for each scenario based on our work this week, listening and learning from other districts, and learning from previous board meetings about what are your questions, what are your concerns about staffing, such as in the hallways, disinfecting rooms, and meal delivery, both in-house and remotely. Tonight, there's a lot to take in, there's a lot to consider, and a lot to discuss. So let's get to it. Elliot, can you please cue the slides? So this is the first hybrid that we spoke about. It was K-8 full in person and grades 9 through 12 students with disabilities in person as well. And then 9 through 12 general education are a hybrid, AA, remote, BB. And so we broke it down by buildings, the staffing and transportation. And so each principal or pairs of principals will go through each one of these. And that's how we'll sort of run through this evening to discuss. And we can stop at any time, answer questions or wonderings.
Just if we can make sure we like tapping on what the transportation is. I see it says 3 tiers, but as we're talking about, how does that affect like start times and all those things?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Elm and Alden.
All right, well, I can start. So with the buildings, what the plan was under this arrangement is that we would have 2 classrooms for each homeroom. And so, for instance, Mrs. Carey would have 2 classrooms given to her at Elm Drive the same way, would be split up that way. In one of the 2 classrooms, Mrs. Carey would be located. In the other classroom, a teaching assistant would be located. And so main instruction would be done in Mrs. Carey's class with at least the beginning of this, we were looking at streaming the class into the other room. And then later on, when she goes to another class, if that was reading, for instance, she would likely teach writing in the other classroom and stream the writing back to the initial classroom. So the idea was to have 2 classrooms for each teacher. And at this point, Elm and Alden have enough room to do that.
So wait, Tom, when you say the slide says location into 2 locations, you're just talking about 2 separate rooms or a room and part of the gym, or are you talking about, a classroom here and a classroom, say, in the middle school?
No, all in our same building. So all the Alden classes 3 through 5 would be in our building, and all the K-2 in that building. And we looked at locale too to try to make these rooms side by side or across the hall from each other, so they'd be convenient for the teachers.
Okay.
Can I
Mike,
get some on what 3 tiers means? Transportation 3 tiers?
So yeah, we can speak to that. So looking at the slide, so our team of admins, are we saying 3 tiers, or are we going with the 2-tier system where we said K4 and then 512? if someone can clarify that for me, because I know that we were looking at two different models.
Yeah, so where we are with transportation is that we are only able to get K-4 on one run.
Right.
So, so 5 would have to be on the next run, and this would require 3 tiers, because we wouldn't be able to get everybody on that second tier.
Got it.
So Brian, does that mean that students would start at 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, 10 in the morning? Like, what does that mean for school starting times when you say run?
Yeah, there would. So for 5th grade, there would be an offset of an hour, in order to be able to accommodate that second run. And then the rest of the times, I don't believe were completely vetted yet.
But you got to figure the time to clean the buses, right? And then
Yes.
get back out again.
Right.
So, I mean, I can't imagine it being much shorter than that. I mean, not just cleaning the bus, but getting all the kids, getting them off the bus, cleaning the bus, going out, getting all the kids, getting them back in, getting them off the bus again. That's got to be, I would think, an hour in between, you know, the first group and the second group.
Yeah, an hour to an hour and 15 probably, and it will just have to see how, because really we're just disinfecting the high touch areas in between, so that wouldn't take too long. Deb or Karen, if you want to chime in and think about how long it would take, but we were generally thinking about an hour and 10 minutes.
Correct, Brian. I was waiting for Karen to answer.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my mute button. But yes, I would say about an hour. They're just wiping down and, sorry, they all have the disinfectant wipes on the buses with them. So it's just a matter of pulling over and doing the high contact areas and then going on to the next tier.
So can I ask a question? So have you done this run through already? Like, is this what you guys are basing this on? So whoever going to be cleaning the bus did a dry run to see how it worked, and also has taken into consideration, like, if there is a bus stop or a daycare that has 4 kids, are those 4 kids going to be able to sit together on the bus? Because then you're not going to have to take up other seats. Is that part of this tiering?
Yeah,
I mean,
daycares can sit together because they're already all together in one cohort. Families can sit together. I was running through today trying to do a K-4 on a bus with 5th grade separate, and it's pretty tight. So you wouldn't have room for a lot of people like moving around. You'd have to kind of stick to what you say you're going to do instead of, there will be no going to like friends' houses and things like that.
So also has it been thought about that if parents really want their kids in school, that they would open up, because right now it's a 1 mile radius, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, for parents that have to drive their students to school? Is there any thought that it goes out a little bit further to ease the amount of students on the bus to help get these children back in school? Has that been a consideration? And also, what time are you talking? What time would you be getting the kids? If there's 3 tiers, can you tell me what are the times that the students would start school?
So I could speak to the radius, Claudia, and no, there hasn't been consideration to changing the radius because that would be voter approval. So we would, if we were going to do something like that, and that's where the board wanted to go, then we would have to put that up for referendum. So no, we haven't thought about any kind of a schedule for a referendum on that. And I guess if we wanted to, our first step would be to see how many people were affected and how many people would change their decision about driving their kids if they couldn't avail themselves to transportation, and just looking at the difference between that. And on the times, I don't know if any of the other administrators have any thoughts about start times and the like.
Yeah, Brian, will that be part of actually like initiating this? Like if we said like this is the one we're going to go with, and you had asked parents, you know, like who can drive their kid in, and you get X amount like, I would just hate to see like all the work go into the tiers and the bus routes and everything, if we know that like half the parents can drive their kids in and half can't, and 30% want to keep them home. But like, I don't know, are we putting the cart before, like, it's almost which comes first, the chicken or the egg, you know what I mean? Like, because I think at the last meeting we were saying like, oh my God, my husband just yelled the chicken. Oh my God. Like I was talking to neighbors today and I said, you know, if and when this happens, you know, between myself, my husband and my neighbor, we had like 5 kids we could, you know, bring in to ease the, you know, kind of help with that type thing.
But,
So,
you know, the problem, Jen, in my eyes is, let's say you commit to drive 5 kids in every day. And then on the second week you go, oh, like Christ, I can't take this. And you say, you're gonna have to take the bus. We still have to provide that bus that they ride in on. So if we've cut ourselves so close to the edge where, you know, 5 kids could push us over the edge, I think we're asking for trouble. Because
so that's what we've done here in this whole presentation, is not take any assumptions. So when you see those numbers, that's virtually every kid in the district having a seat there. We know that in reality, that's not going to be the case, but just as Perry said, we have to be prepared for that. So we go with the max, and then hopefully our situation is a little more, gives us a little more leeway, I guess, when we go through it.
And you'll see later in the presentation that we were able to do a 2-tier with K-5 all in. So we'll show you that.
okay.
In 2 slides.
How much does third tier cost of the 1.9 million?
About 243,000.
Thank you.
Ryan, can you explain the 3 tiers as far as who, is it 3 runs that we'd have to do? And if it is, you know, who would be in part of that? I know the first one is K4. So what would be the other tiers / runs or whatever it might be?
Yeah, so I didn't have part in this piece of it, actually. So I'm gonna need some help as to where we were with the 3 tiers when this came out. Anybody want to share?
I could speak to secondary. Yeah, I could speak to secondary. So the secondary school, the middle school, and the high school would have to be on the first tier to get those students in, to make sure that they synchronize with the students remote.
Would that be able to be done in 1 run, or would it have to be 2 runs?
Yes.
Yes,
So
1 run. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Well, when we were speaking about this, we went with the understanding from the previous meeting when it was said that K through 5 couldn't all be on 1 run. With the addition of the secondary students 6, 7, and 8 coming in, we initially went with this run with the students with disabilities 9 through 12 also coming in. We assumed that that would still be the case, and that 5th grade would still have to be on its separate run from the K4. That's how we initially staggered the 3 runs. And then you'll see later where we were able to create some scheduling options that we looked at, if potentially the 5th graders could come in on the secondary schedule. So it would be 5th, and then the secondary students that would be coming in on any given day. So assuming secondary remained in hybrid, or at least 9 through 12 remained in hybrid, if we could fit the 5th graders on that run, we were able to look at the schedules of shared staff that's shared between an elementary school and secondary school, and able to tweak that so that it could still stay within the teacher's day to work at both buildings if 5th grade started on the secondary schedule.
So can we sort of take a step back? $1.9 million. Now that I'm assuming is extra from what we had planned to spend, and I'm assuming that maybe we got rid of some cafeteria folks. We're bringing them back, so maybe that's not quite a complete ad. But we're talking about to do AAR or AABB. We need $1 million. Well, not all AA. So K to 8, 9, and then disabilities in school, 9 to 12, hybrid AAR, AABB is going to cost us an extra 1.65 million or 650 million. Jesus, $1.65 million. without
Yes.
transportation involved.
Yes.
So the principals and Caroline got together and thought about going through the day and what a child's day is going to be like, and thought about some of the board recommendations about making sure that we have plenty of staff, and who's monitoring the hallways and checking the bathrooms. And so based on that, they came up with staff, and you can see the staffing pattern as to who else is going to be needed. And that total amount was a $1.9 million when you add in all of the positions that you see there, the 7 teaching assistants at Elm Drive, as an example, 2 monitors, a typist monitor. And then, of course, in this instance, the third tier was that approximate $243,000. And in all of our modeling today, it's going to include 2 additional custodians.
Okay.
So that 1.9, that doesn't include like the regular bus runs. It's just the extra stuff that we would need to have this.
That's exactly right. And it only includes stuff that we're thinking about, expenditures that we're thinking about from a general fund perspective.
Now, does this get us out of, because I'm really worried about substitutes, where we're going to get substitute, because these kids are going to be in remote, some of them, for a long time. And so are we, I'm worried that where are we going to get substitutes that are trained on how to do all the stuff that our teachers are working through? And does this get us so these, like if a teacher is out or 2 teachers are out, there are teaching assistants that are going to take over the class? Is that why those numbers are so high?
Well, the reality is that when you take each class in every building and you essentially have to split it, utilizing the staff that we already have, there may be some potential for splitting into 2 rooms, and then there would be an excess number of rooms that need to be split and need supervision. So if a teaching assistant is going to be their primary source of reinforcement in that classroom, it really should be a teaching assistant, because they can actually provide direct instruction to students under the supervision of a teacher. So in reality, it would be, this is what it's going to cost to be able to have like discrete instructional spaces for each of our classes. 1 class now becomes 2 classes because we can only have 11 students in a classroom, full-size classroom.
Hey, Caroline, can I ask you a question? If maybe not to you, maybe to one of the principals or something, but what about going into, I know that some people didn't want it, but what about going into, I don't know, the auditorium at the middle school? That seems a big pace that they can keep all the kids in one instead of splitting them up. The high school or the gym in the middle school or the lunchroom, something like, instead of keeping, if we don't have to split them up and we can put them into one bigger area, is that something that's possible?
Yeah. And we've talked about that a couple of times as one of the ways in which, there may be a possibility of reducing some of the need for extra staff. The one caution that I would say, and when I'm done, I will ask Tom just to speak to it, because I know he kind of mapped that out in his building fairly well. But the one caution I will say is in combination with what Perry just asked about the fact that, does this get us out of the sub-crisis, right? And I don't know that anything's going to get us out of the sub-crisis, because we need bodies. In the event of somebody being absent for whatever reason, we could be talking about multiple day absences where someone may have allergy symptoms, and now we have to vet that they're allergy symptoms and not COVID related. That is going to prolong absences that may otherwise have been a day, have a sinus infection, start taking medicine, feeling better, I'm coming back. We're now waiting for COVID testing. We're now waiting for, quarantine potentially, whatever those cases may be. So we could have a situation where we would have, a teacher absent, and then something happens and there's another person absent, and, that person was in contact with this person who's waiting for testing. And there could be a whole lot of variables that could play into the need for substitutes. So for me, I guess the way that I look at it, and I think Laura may have said this on Tuesday, if we have the bodies, we can use them. if we don't have these people, it could be crippling if we have a couple of those absences. And that's really the struggle. So if our goal is to bring as many students back to campus, you know, and Brian said that we went through this and created this, as much as it probably looks like a wish list, to be looking at 7 staff here, 6 staff here, in order to bring students back and have that coverage, this is who we're going to need. And Tom, can you just speak a little bit to how you mapped out your all-purpose room to be able to have a large group instructional space?
Sure. So early on, we put marks on the floor, tape on the floor to have 6 foot by 6 foot, you know, locations throughout the all-purpose room. And that we mainly did that for arrival time in our gym and so on. And we had 88 spots that we were able to tape out on the Alden floor. It doesn't mean we can fit 88 desks in there, but it does mean that we could have a large cohort of kids. We know that it likely would be, you know, in the upper 40s range, if not even to the low 60s. So we have to actually look at how many desks could actually be put in there. At Alden Place too, we also marked out our art room, which is pretty good size, and our library. And in the art room has 17 desks in there currently. The library has room for 19.
Okay.
Can I ask, how does remote instruction work with this model? I mean, if a teacher's in 2 different places, is the remote going to follow the teacher, or what would happen with remote?
So go ahead,
Mike.
Doesn't matter. So in this situation at Elm, using kind of a similar model to what Tom said, kindergarten would actually be in our all-purpose room. So this model does actually take into account using that. Otherwise, the number would be 9 teaching assistants. But so if I'm a first grade teacher, I have my class, and then ideally across the hall is the other half of my class. And so that teacher and that teaching assistant, that's why it's crucial that they're a teaching assistant, are sort of co-planning once they develop that relationship. So it's almost as if they're co-teaching this group of roughly 16 children, but we have to split them in 2 different rooms because of the 6 feet. Keep in mind that while that's going on, there are, if let's say in that grade, 5 families have elected to keep their child home, one of those 2 must be constantly monitoring those students on a computer.
Okay.
So that's what it looks like. You know, you're kind of stretching that out over 2 different classrooms, and then a computer screen or multiple computer screens. And between those 2, they're teaching one section of first grade.
And
I mean, too, that, you know, I hate to be that guy, but the larger the cohort, you know, the risk of, you know, a larger quarantine and, you know, I mean, we started out very tight, and I'd hate to get completely loose to have a whole grade in one room, and God forbid there's an infection, and then what? So, I mean, I just to put it in perspective, I figured I'd say.
I think something to keep in mind when you look at this slide, and before we switch over to secondary with Steve and Rick, is that we wanted to start off with, it felt like in the other meeting, this is kind of the one that we wanted, you know, that we had drawn attention to, meaning the whole group, not just us, you know, the board as well. So we want to see, all right, so what's this really look like? And let's start here. And if this is the biggest, this is like the biggest ask, K through 8 in everybody. And then let's get that, and then let's peel back each one. So as you see through tonight's presentation, each one will be a little less, a little less, a little less.
But I mean, the bottom line though is, at some point, unless, you know, Cuomo comes out and says, don't worry about social distancing in school, go forth and have fun, this is going to be the model we will end up at some point. I mean, actually, hopefully we'll even end up, you know, where 9 through 12, everybody's back. But to do that, you know, this is what we have to do. So, I mean, we can delay it, you know, we can say, oh, we'll go AABB, you know, for everybody. And, you know, we'll do that to January, and then we'll bring them back. Hopefully by then, well, I mean, I can't imagine social distancing is gone, so we still have to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think something to be considered when we're talking about the large group spaces, you know, it could potentially consolidate what may take like, 4 to 6 classrooms. We may be able to consolidate that back into one large space and still have more space to social distance at 6 feet or beyond. So, I mean, that's really what we're talking about. It would be the same social distancing in these large group spaces. And I understand what you're saying, Chris, that then you're talking about an entire cohort of kids or an entire grade level of kids. And I hear what you're saying, but in some of our gyms, we even have the ability to, draw those like partition walls. Kids could be facing opposite ways, still socially distanced. So we could create sort of discrete spaces within some of those spaces. And because of that, while it may seem conceptually like, we're putting all those kids together, they may be in the gym, but they may actually not be together.
No, I understand that. And you also have to just consider, and I know you have, and I'm not questioning anything, but just the quality of education with 40 to 60 students in one large space. How do you really determine that one kid that's quiet that might need some extra help? It's just going to pose a bigger challenge and a little bit more risk. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
So let me
go ahead.
sort of a fundamental question, and it's probably splitting hairs. This $1.9 million, is that assuming that we're going back to like November 1st, so it didn't, it doesn't count September and October, so it's really 2 point something for a full school year? Or is this what would be a full school year number?
That's an annualized rate.
Okay, so
Yes.
so the one thing for the public to understand is, we'll have to figure out how to come up with the money to, if this is what we do, find the money to pay for this for the rest of the year. However, this is going to have to go into taxes next year if this, God forbid, but if this keeps going, this doesn't go away. So, to keep in mind that, so I don't know what the actual number would be if we started, let's say we somehow hired all these folks November 1st, which I assume we're not, would like to give them an hour of training. But what would that number be? Would it be like 1/6?
Well, in general terms, you could think of it in terms of being probably 80% of that number, because it would be 0.8 of where we're at. But Perry, everything that you just said, thanks for saying, because one of the things, obviously, any amount that we spend is an unbudgeted amount. So we would be talking about delving into our fund balance. And we would be talking about, listen, boards for quite some time have been really careful about being fiscally responsible and making sure that we remain in a good financial place. Make no mistake about it, whatever it is that we have to do in COVID world, we're going to take a hit to our fund balance. As you can see, so let's just say for this 1.9 that you see there, that's already about $600,000 more than what's in our 4% unreserved fund balance. So on a move forward basis, you're absolutely right. If that's something we're going to continue with, we will certainly be piercing our cap, be going over our 2% and requesting of our taxpayers to come in and support us to make sure that we can continue to do this. And we would require over 60% supermajority in next year if that were to continue. So you're smart, I think, to highlight that, and our fund balance will be diminished significantly no matter what we do.
Yep.
But important to note.
So, and I thought there was need to bring, or hopefully bring back some of our cafeteria folks that were let go, I guess, earlier, or at the beginning of the year. Are they in here or not?
No, as I shared, so this is just general fund expenditures. It has nothing to do with the cafeteria fund. So as we hire cafeteria people back, Holly is doing everything with her staff to try to remain self-sustaining. So like we talked about at the last board meeting, she's going to add people on an as needed basis. and not add when not needed, because she wants to do everything that she can to have her bottom line where it needs to be. So, and Holly, if you have anything to add, please feel free. One thing that I didn't do at our last board meeting, that I couldn't unstick my mute button, but when you accepted the financials, I didn't, and got into discussion, I didn't get a chance to share with you that Holly and her staff did end up materializing a $7,400 profit in the summer program. So I just going to take advantage of the opportunity to share it now and congratulate them. So, you know, they had a goal and they came out with it. So my congratulations and to them, and thank you for their hard work.
Yeah, we're going to take that money and stash it someplace before the Cuomo finds out about it. Okay. All right. Any other questions on this model?
I do have a question. Laura, can you please tell me what the times that the kids would start then, what the tiers would be? What would be the bus run times? Like the times?
I think that would be more, I mean, we've discussed it. We haven't made concrete decisions about time, but we can work on it and come back to you next week with those more granular questions and responses. Happy to do that. With this one, I just wanted to share that it at least shows us that we can go K-8 in person. It's doable. It really spreads us thin, almost a fragile structure if folks start showing COVID-related symptoms, kids and adults, and being able to find people to supervise or teach those classrooms when there are no teachers there. To the large space piece, that could be a plan B if that starts happening with this structure, that we start moving kids to larger spaces, whether that's optimal or not. Also thinking about, with all of these scenarios, are we going to go all in K-8 in person on the first day? Or are we going to start sort of a hybrid within a hybrid, and how do we roll students in sort of just to see how it feels and how we're doing, and do we have everything set, and are there any surprises, and just sort of transitioning in slowly, whether that's by grade or by a different kind of hybrid. Or so just some things to think about as we're going through this. What does reentry really look like on the first day of whatever decision is made?
So, hey, Caroline,
if I may say, I kind of been thinking that this is kind of the full model, but we have to be able to, if something hits us where there's just too much sickness, we have to somehow, maybe, you know, with 2-week notice, say, look, guys, we look community and students, we have to kick back to a different model.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately, it's going to be that's very trying on the parents to find help or whatever they need. And but I think that's the risk that people have to understand by doing these things, is that we're doing the best we can do, and we can't imagine what kind of sickness is coming at us.
Yeah, we may be required to pivot, as the word is,
Right.
at any time to a different model.
Right.
And that's why these conversations are great, because we're figuring out what truly is viable and be able to be flexible and swing in any direction that we need to.
Well, even with teachers, I mean, the new snow day might be remote day. You know, if we don't have a teacher, we might have to have a remote day, you know, and that's really tough for parents. But if we have nowhere I mean, we should be able to shift, but maybe not in this model.
And that's where the availability of, you know, those large group spaces are going to be particularly helpful, because if we got into a situation where, you know, we had a couple of people who didn't come to campus, say like on a Monday, there was no reason to believe that there was a larger impact of that based on like contact tracing from the health department, we could potentially combine in those larger spaces. And with this model where we have, I don't want to say extra because they would not be extra, but we have other adults in the building who could step in those scenarios. You know, that would really be the most helpful case of having this much additional staff. A model like this, sure, the intention would be that everyone would be in separate classrooms, splitting each homeroom. But if we needed to, we could potentially utilize a different space in the opportunity to maintain instructional continuity.
So Caroline, just as a sort of general question, so this has 9 to 12 on this AABV schedule. Does that actually fit with, the way high school schedules are put together?
Yeah, I think that is possibly the reason that we landed on this. Is probably one of the more helpful things about this is that if you either have days that are classes that are every day meeting, or they meet every other day. And when you have the AA back to back, so you would get like phys ed on Monday, and then you might get biolab on Tuesday. So whatever those classes are that rotate, you could potentially get them in the AA-BB model, and you would get both of them. So that's kind of why that was a preferable structure, because regardless of what cohort you're in, you would still have those every other day classes.
But wouldn't you, so if you were AA, and I don't know how this really works, but if you had a biolab on Tuesday, if you were one of, because we're talking about, so that would only be on Tuesday? Or
no, because they would alternate. The labs would be every other day, structured on an AB, 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 AB. So if you have this and you are coming in Monday and you're coming in Tuesday, whatever your A day schedule or odd day schedule and your even day schedule, you would be hitting both of them because you're coming in 2 consecutive days.
Okay, and the kids that are on remote are just doing it remotely.
Correct.
I mean, we still have to figure out, the issue that's in most of the colleges is, how do you do labs if you can't go to campus?
Yeah, and there is some leniency. New York State does have required labs. They have lab minutes, and then they have specific required labs, and there has been some leniency on what that looks like in COVID world. So yes, material handling, all of that stuff was thought to be extremely problematic. We did get a little bit of a breather with that. So it's a little less problematic at this time because of some of the, I don't want to call it flexibility, but for lack of a better term, I'll say flexibility that we've been granted by New York State to get those labs done.
Okay. And one last, the bus supervisor stipends, what are those?
Yeah, so Mike, do you want to talk about that? Because that was something that I know has to do with specifically elementary students.
Sure. So traditionally, there's a small bus stipend for someone at the elementary level that has bus duty, which means that they're there helping the kids off the bus, seeing them into the school, and then more importantly, after school. And oftentimes that goes outside of the teacher day. So that's where we carry that stipend. In this case, when having to take temperatures of students, we'll need 2 at the bus point of drop off to take temperatures of students. And we'll also need 1 at the alternative parent drop off point. So instead of 1 person, we now need 3 at each. So we're increasing that position.
Okay.
All that means is that it's a teacher doing it, but instead of it being the PE teacher, now it's PE, art, and perhaps someone else.
Yeah, no. I know it's a nit, but we should already have 1 of these supervisor stipends in our budget, because there's always a monitor. You say we need 2 more, right?
Yeah, actually, great catch. So you're right. 2 at Elm and 2 at Alden.
So that number comes down to $1,902,198,000.
Yeah, 1901 is what that is for each one. So we're chipping away, which is all right.
Can I ask, sorry, Claudia, I cut you off. Are these people, like, do we kind of know who we could get for these positions, or are we like, oh my God, we have to start interviewing right away, or like where are we in that process, and how difficult do you think it would be to get there if we said, okay, we're going to start this way?
That's a great question, because we would absolutely need to advertise and start interviewing right away, because these are not people that we know of. We currently have I think Laura, you mentioned this before, we currently have a very small substitute teacher pool even. So, if it became true that some of them were interested in this position, there's going to be the trickle down effect of not having additional subs on the sub list. So yes, we absolutely need to go out and look for these new positions and new people.
Okay.
But you're talking 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Yes,
bringing
we are.
30 people on board, you know, even if it's a month to do it, bringing 30 people on board is not, especially in this day and age. And I'm assuming these are all, well, I shouldn't say this but a temp position, right? They're not intended to be, or I don't know how you do this contractually. You know, like basically you say, if they ever ease up on social distancing and these things, then we'll pull back on these.
Right.
Yeah, you would make whatever appointments you're going to make. And then as we come out of it, you would access positions.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Oh,
Probably more
sorry,
question, but another question now.
So the 2 custodians aren't in here either?
They are.
Here.
They are in the dollar amount.
Oh, all right. Okay. Sorry, Claudia.
No, the question I have is, I know, Laura, last time we talked about calling other schools to see what they are doing, how it's working, pros and cons for them that have already gone back to the hybrid model. Is anybody able to call and talk to them?
Yes, there's a lot of listservs and a lot of sharing of information between superintendents, teachers, business officials. A lot of what we're talking about here, mostly around the personnel piece, is in response to those conversations that they are advising those who are implementing a hybrid or full in person, whatever they're choosing, to layer up with personnel. So this is in response to that. But overall, I mean, there are lots of good stories, and sort of the ones very similar to the ones that you heard at our last board meeting from our principals about how remote is going, how our soft hybrid is going. So there's a lot of good, visionary, innovative, pedagogical practices happening, and trial and error, of course. But they're also on the ground. These are the things that are needed by those districts as well as us to have a successful and safe hybrid, with the hope of in person in various spots throughout the district, full in person.
Right. So cool. Why don't we start moving through the other models? Because I think there's, you know, this sort of the same questions are going to come up, I would think, and apply to most, I would assume, apply to most of these.
Mm-hmm. So this one is the K6 in person, very similar to the K8 with its in needs and challenges. The 7-12 students with disabilities in person as well, and grades 7 through 12 hybrid AARBB. Again, you'll see the 3 tiers of transportation that are needed, the multiple teaching assistants that we need because we're spread out through our buildings. And I don't know if there's anything else to add.
There's no cost savings between this one and the one before.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe minimal anyway.
But didn't I hear, or maybe I misunderstood, that if we went K to 4, we could go move this to a 2-tier.
But well, we can go to the next screen.
Okay. All
Next
right.
slide.
Well, hang on. I want to make sure anybody on the board has any additional questions about this one.
I was just curious of why it doesn't save any money on the previous one when you're bringing in 2 extra grades. But we may need the same amount of people, so I guess that might answer the question.
Yeah, if you notice, the majority of the staff that we're looking at is really additions at the elementary level. So a lot of that is going to stay static between these models because these models will encompass the entirety of the elementary student body. So as you look at it, these first couple of slides are going to be fairly consistent where they're covering K5. And if you look at the additional teaching assistant positions, the majority of them are on the elementary level.
Right. Plus the 3 tiers cost us more.
Correct.
Hey, Mike Ragusa, are you there?
Yeah.
Mike, I should have asked this earlier, but the 2 custodians here, you're already down 3, if my calculations are correct. Is this 2 on top of that 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we've been shuffling people around and bringing subs in and stuff like that to make up for the 3 right now. But we've been the last couple of days, we've been going over different scenarios and what's got to be done during the day. And if we go to different areas and if somebody gets sick, and I would just we need to be prepared to take care of whatever needs to be taken care of, and instead of just getting by, and then if something happens, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that those two were net add on top of the 3 that you're already down. Okay.
And right, and depending on the hybrid that we choose, that would determine the hours of those 2 extra custodians, whether it be 7 to 3, 3 to 11, or I'm thinking maybe 11 to 7, to try and get some of the day work done and then help into the night. It depending on how many people are in the building, and which hybrid we go to, and then what has to be done for the next day every day.
Okay. All right.
So here's the one that has the difference. It's the same staffing needs, mostly front-loaded in Elm and Alden, because again, we're spreading across the buildings and having the teaching assistants and teachers teaching the same grades. But the transportation is the piece that is new. So here, in collaboration with First Student, we've determined that we're able to have K4 on the first tier, and then have a second tier that has 5th grade traveling with the grades 6 through 12. 5th grade would be every day, and then the rest of the grades 6 through 12 would be hybrid AA, R, BB.
So on the R day, we would be basically hauling nothing but 5th graders on that bus.
And would we have students with
Students
disabilities?
with disabilities. Mhm.
Right. Yeah. But I meant, like, out of the kids that aren't already being transported, on Wednesday, the 5th graders would be on the bus by themselves.
Correct.
That's correct.
Why does the middle school and high school need the monitors and teaching assistants? Am I missing something here? Why does the middle school need as many people?
Yeah, so in the last meeting, there was some concern about monitoring bathrooms, and also one of them would be potentially charged with assisting with the isolation room. So when we spoke about that, that was one of the considerations, was how would we have consistent monitoring of bathrooms, common areas, hallways,
Coverages.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, and for teaching assistants for coverages. Sorry to interrupt.
Right. Oh, yeah. And the teaching assistants would be for coverages. And again, it goes back to, having them may seem like a huge, tall order, and we get that, but not having them can be very crippling to our goal, which is to bring these students back in some model.
And these extra folks would work 4 days a week in middle school and high school.
Well, don't forget that the students with disabilities 6 through 12 would be in the building all the time.
But you don't need as many people, right? You have 20 children maybe in each building.
Right. So
you don't need 4 monitors, right?
Well, maybe if so this was out of the consideration. One of them would be in the isolation room, and the others would be monitoring the restrooms. Like there was a whole conversation about monitoring the restrooms. And we had spoken about that at first glance. We really believe that we could use some of the teacher duties for that. But then that means that if we have to pull those teachers off of duties to cover classrooms for any good reason.
Yeah, I understand that for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, but I'm talking about Wednesday. Wednesday, when there's a max of 20 kids in the high school and the middle school, or I don't know what the exact number is. You don't need that many monitors, right? For 20 kids?
I mean,
when the same amount to 150 or 180 kids?
Right. So students currently are using the restroom that are in the school. There is no monitor now. The monitors for the restrooms came out of the last most recent conversation that we had as a group, where that was something that was really stressed, that there needs to be somebody there to monitor that. So that's where some of this came from. I think there has to be a collective decision as to whether we need to have that, or whether we're going to create the structures in place and do what we can to educate our students about the importance of following those rules and reinforcing them where we know they're being violated.
I think John's only point is if we had, you know, on the monitors and teaching assistants, wouldn't they be 4-day employees versus 5, given that on Wednesday, nobody is in the school except special ed or students with disabilities? You know,
That is correct at the secondary level, but keep in mind.
And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying, but Carolyn says you need the monitors there no matter if there's one kid in the building.
No, I didn't say that. We have kids in the building now and we don't have any monitors. So this came out of a discussion in this group where, you know, that seemed to be something that was very important to some. So we've added this. We have to decide how that's going to be utilized. And if that is something that is an absolute must, it needs to remain on the list. If it is not an absolute must, or it's contingent upon the number of students in the building, then that's something that we need to look at differently.
Yeah, and all of this was about optimal and then finding maybe areas that we could peel back. So
Yeah,
the exact conversations we can have.
I mean, I think the first thing to do is to really understand, you know, you sort of do it in 2 pieces. You know, I like model X the best because it gives us this, 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 and this, and it accomplishes these things for the students and these things for the parents. Then you have the second concept, which is, I really like that model, except it's too damn expensive. What can we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, well, you know, we're going to have to trust our kids in the bathrooms, or that they're, you know, not going to get 35 in a bathroom. We're going to have to, you know, roll the dice. I'm, like I said before, I'm really worried about the, you know, needing substitutes. So we could say we're going to roll the dice on teaching assistants. But I think the first thing for us to do, you know, it's good for us to know in my opinion, it's good for us to know the financial cost of doing something optimal. And then we can, you know, really think more about, here's what K-5 is going to be in person, 6 to 12 students with, you know, disabilities will be in person, or is there another model that we like better? And then we start to say, well, you know, $1,659,000, can we do something to get that down to 1.4, or, you know what I mean? I think that's the way we're going to have to approach this, and we'll have to reset. I mean, it's not like there's this never-ending pile of money that we can just go dive into. That would be kind of cool, but we go dive into and, you know, pull out teaching assistants and supervisors and all this other stuff. We have to figure a way to make it fit with what we have, at least until we can go do the budget for next year.
And I think something that really needs to be considered is when we're talking about students with disabilities, as we're adding this back for a long-term plan, we may be adding back additional students. Like, this is not just the students, the 34 students who are currently in the building in special class programs, but this incorporates a much larger population who also have, you know, some kind of educational vulnerability. So we're talking about larger than just the 34 students who are here now that we would be bringing in. So I understand what you're saying, that it wouldn't maybe have as large a population, but they're going to be here.
How much is that max? I don't have any sense. How many children are you talking about?
Well, we have 128 students with disabilities currently being served in the district. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how many parents will send them, but that's the number. Maximum. Yeah, in some capacity or another.
Thank you. That's a good amount.
Yeah, I mean, and we can also, you know, again, we can work the number hopefully down. You know, we can say, and again, I'm not going to, I mean, I'm just making up options. You take a teaching assistant from Elm and you say, look, I need somebody to cover at the middle school, or I need somebody to cover, you know, maybe there's options to do that. Maybe there's an option to make some of these, you know, the monitors are 4-day a week, or they're paid by the hour. So if we need them for, you know, 32 hours, we pay them for 32 hours. If the following week we realize we only need them for 28, I don't know. I don't know how all the, how all those financial arrangements are made. But I think we, knowing the price of a model and then knowing what it is gives us a rough order of magnitude of what it's going to cost,
Correct.
and which one is the most doable and gives us the most, or gives our parents and our students and our taxpayers the most for what they're paying for. Okay. Any other questions on this model? Does everybody, I mean, I guess you've thought through this from psychologist standpoint. Leaving in the previous one, having the high school students, the only ones that do AABB. In this one, it's, K to 12. There's no sort of, Jesus, how come we're the low end? I mean, nobody has a problem with this as far as a message it sends or any of that stuff.
Well, I do think that it's important to note that these are our adolescents who tend to be very creative and risk takers in some aspect. So we have discussed that as an administrative team, and the reality is while they are independent and can quote unquote care for themselves, we don't really necessarily enjoy the idea of a lack of supervision in some homes either.
Yeah.
I agree, Caroline, 100%, but I think the K through 5 should be put to K through 6, because I don't think the 6th graders are, if they have to stay home, if they have to, again, I think I personally, with 2 boys, I get it. I think it should be, I mean, I would be personally okay with 7th at home, not 6th. So I wish that these models were K through 6 and then the 7 through 12, whatever it may be. That's just my personal opinion, having 2 boys.
Yeah. I mean, I think this was probably done more to look at Elm and Alden in and middle school and high school out, or you know what I mean, more than the age of the kids, I guess. All right, you want to go to the next one then? Nobody else has a question?
I was just going to say, you got to keep in mind too, as many parents want their kids back, a lot of them that don't want them back 5 days, or I shouldn't say a lot, some of them. So I agree with Claudia as far as the age gap. But that's, to me, it's splitting hairs between 6th and 7th, but I guess it's a good point.
Well, I mean, we've had notes saying, I absolutely hate the AABB. And then I have other notes that say, don't do 5 days a week, do AABB. And other ones saying, just let them stay home, do full remote. I mean, there's always going to be, the only thing that's really gonna sort of solve everything is send them all back. And not only, that from a timing standpoint, it solves everything, but from an infectious disease standpoint, it doesn't fix much of anything. And it puts our kids at risk, and it's not doable, not with social distancing.
On this thread, what would happen if we had let's just say K through 8 was full day, and some parents feel that's too much? And what if they came in 2 days and then they just stayed home for the BB days? We would count that as an absence, or we would count that as attendance?
Well, I think that we would have to create a system where the parents are, if they're opting for remote. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have difficulty going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So while we understand.
I understand that.
Right. So that's where we had said that, and I apologize, my light just went off, but that's where we had said that with that ability to choose to keep your children remote, that would have to be for like a semester, right? So if you're sending your student in, the expectation is that they're coming to school because we're planning for them to be here. We understand students get sick. We understand that there's reasons why they can't come in, regularly. Some of those realities of school have not gone away. But if you're committing to sending your child in, right, unless you're then committing to switching to remote, which can be more flexibly done than going remote to in person, the commitment has to be for that semester or
I think what
whatever.
I'm saying is, what if a parent wanted to make a commitment of a K-8 person attending just AA days?
That doesn't sound like a commitment, though. That
No.
sounds like they're picking their own. And I mean, I think as a group, we're going to have to decide how flexible we're going to be with making our own schedule,
Exactly.
because that's not something that's going to be sustainable either. Not from a busing perspective, not from a cafeteria's perspective, I mean, that's going to be a challenge.
Well,
Well, from a busing perspective, you've already got the seat there. It sounds like you're already, assuming worst case. So the seat's there anyway.
It's just about schedules at that point, and the bus driver knowing
Yes.
who to pick up, and and so if they're
Well,
in and out, it's
and
we can provide choice,
even from
and
a-
choice is great, but it's choice with commitment.
And even from a class standpoint, I mean, it doesn't mean the parent's going to say, I'm going to do AAs and not BBs. The next one says, I really hate Mondays and Fridays, so I'm going to do an ARB schedule. And, and then somebody says, well, I really like R, and, so,
it wouldn't be that flexible.
but I do, I mean, so let's say a kid, has a headache and sent home under, go get a COVID test or hang out for 10 days. I mean, I'm assuming we're taking into account that student can then go, work from home unless they're really sick, and then, of course not. But if they're just home because they're waiting for test results, they should be able to move, right?
Yep, and we're prepared for that.
Yeah, and I think the in-person to remote is a much easier transition than flip-flopping, starting remote and then deciding midway, I want to send my child back to school tomorrow. That's going to be a very complicated task.
I don't think people want to have that kind of loosey-goosey commitment. I think maybe some do, but I think most there are some out there, I think, that probably want a AABB where they're home. They're going to school 2 days a week. They just don't feel, they feel 5 days is just too much. So it's for that group.
I think it might depend on the age too, because I have to say that I feel like the majority of people that I talk to with my daughter's age would like those kids in 5 days a week. But I think it depends on the age of the child you're talking about, and it depends on, who you talk to, what neighborhood you live in, or who you're familiar with.
Yeah.
In the past, you did say it would be counted as, I believe, don't get me wrong, if they were out for COVID reasons, it would be a sick day that they were out for. But it's good to hear that they'd be able to work remote. I'm just wanted to confirm that.
Are we talking about a teacher or are we talking about a student?
A student.
Yeah, I mean, we would give them access. If they're feeling up to it, we would absolutely give them access to remote.
We would make sure that a parent is communicating with this, saying that my child is home, my child is sick. There's still, whether you're in person or remote, we just need to know that that child is actually home under the supervision of a parent.
Now, have we thought through if someone says, okay, I want to come in, it's 5 days a week, and they're a week into it, and the kid is miserable. They're scared, they're whatever it might be. I know it's harder to switch from remote to in person, but what about the opposite? I mean, are you going to say, no, you can't, you're stuck for a quarter? Or
No, I think going in person to remote is something that we can be more flexible with then the commitment being made for the remainder of that time to be remote.
Okay.
Yeah, and I really think it's having conversations with parents. Is there something that we can do that will make the time at school better for the child? Is there something that we're missing, or a support system or anything, and see if we can help that student stay here in person, but of course remain flexible. If remote is going to be the best, then of course, it's setting up systems and conversations and being, empathetic and sensitive, and also knowing that we have to function as a school district as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the AARBB for all. And that requires 2 tiers. Staffing is down from 32 to 19, including custodians. So you see.
So it says emergency classroom and event in event of during school cleaning needed. So this, only in this model do we need to switch, like if there's for some reason, you know, a kid gets sick in room A, we got to swing them over to room B to clean room A.
Yeah, and that's for all models. I mean,
That's
that's
for all
actually for all models. So if there's a student that complains of a COVID-related symptom, escorted to the nurse's office or isolation room, actually, we need to make sure that we have a classroom that class can go to while the custodial staff is disinfecting that classroom where the student was with COVID-related symptoms.
So that means we don't need any split rooms. So we don't need to, you know, to take out rooms that we're using for other purposes and put them to work, other than these emergency classroom.
These are all full-time teaching classrooms, not, that's what did you just say that, Barry?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have a secondary class with a monitor? Okay.
Right. Yeah, and just so I understand, so there's no more of the getting off the bus and getting back on. And and what we're talking about is the AA kids are in the building, but Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they're on remote, and the BB kids are in the building Thursday and Friday.
Right. Everybody has the same schedule. They're just maybe
Okay.
in different locations.
And the AA and the BB are full day schedules, pretty much similar to what they're doing now, right?
That's their 9-period schedule at the secondary level, and the elementary level would have a full day schedule as well, similar to now.
And have you guys looked at, you know, because, you know, this is going to be one of those things where you don't want to end up with, you know, brother and sister, one in A, one in B. You don't want to end up with a second grader and a fifth grader. You know what I mean? Have you at least like taken a surface look at that, Caroline?
Yeah, so we've done a list of common households. So recognizing that some families have multiple different last names, we've looked at that, and we've looked at households. So not necessarily siblings, if they are cousins that live together, we've looked at the household list to be able to do exactly what you're saying, that if you have a 7th grader who would have to watch a 2nd grader if they were home, kind of thing, that they would be on the same day. They would be A cohorts and B cohorts.
Okay.
What happens with transportation here on Wednesday?
On Wednesday?
Yeah.
Well,
We're back on transportation a little bit, right?
yeah. So keep in mind, we do still have some students with disabilities that would be in the building at all times here as well.
And we're also using transportation for meal delivery.
We would go back to our 17 runs that we're currently utilizing as opposed to the rest of the fleet.
Okay.
So basically from 1.9 and 1.6 to $1 million is really the elimination of tier 3 and some more of these in the positions. Right?
That's right. Yeah, the other 13 positions. Yeah.
So it sounds like regardless, we have a lot of interviewing to do, whether we choose, right?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
But you know, I keep coming back to it, but you know, this alternating cohorts, how long is that good for? You know what I mean? Like, you know, you can't do it. Well, maybe you can. I mean, I always took like a model like this or the, you know, the any of the models where it's sort of part-time in class as just a stopgap that, you know, very shortly thereafter, once we're comfortable that works, we're going to go to full-time, you know, everybody's in the building. Or maybe not everybody, but we're going to go to the K to 5 or K to 3, and then we're going to go K to 7, and then, you know, everybody's back. But when I look at these, you know, so yeah, this is over the one, it's $1 million cheaper, but only for the amount of time we actually use it. And then, you know, if we're still in this, I mean, I don't know what the parents would think about okay, so suppose we leave AABB in place for the rest of the 2021 school year. You know, I think people are assuming that this is going to be AABB might take us to January, or might take us to, you know, it may not even take us to winter break. And then when we, you know, at some point we're going to go back to school full time. So you know, it's, you know, I'm getting at, we're not really, we might be able to save a little money this year, like we do this model for, you know, for 5 months.
Or as long as you have social distancing, you cannot, in the high school, you can't have full-time.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, but we can still do, at some point, we're gonna, I think you want K-5, at least K-5 back to school.
Yeah.
And then eventually the middle school. And so this $1 million we're going to spend on this is really, you know, if you broke it down by month, I don't know, maybe we get 3 months worth of AABB out of it. And then we go out and hire another, you know, we double the number of folks here again. And we're back to whatever the monthly bill for $1.9 million is, or $1.6 million.
It's going to be.
I think that just requires, I mean, it's to keep reassessing where are we? What is our ability? What is viable? I think you're right. It may grow. It may ebb and flow, quite honestly. We may have a building that needs to close. So that's going to change the whole landscape.
Yeah. No, again, I'm not really, I mean, I am worried about the numbers, but I'm not really worried about, is it 956 or is it 890? What I'm worried about is, you know, we're going to do this AABB, but how long? You know, are we talking a couple months? If we're talking a couple months, then really the $1.9 million one or the $1.6 million one really isn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't make that much difference whether we start with that one, we start with this and we go to one of those, or we just start with one of those.
Perry, are you saying, all things being equal, that nothing changes, that the governor makes no new proclamations, that nothing changes with with the metrics? Like, is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, the fact he's already had 10 million people tested and there's only 19 million people in the whole state. I'm not sure where all these people are, but I mean, he could shut the schools down. I mean, schools could just shut down tomorrow. You know, if suddenly the numbers start to spike up, the governor's not going to allow this to go like it did in March when, you know, no attention was being paid. So, I mean, I'm just, what I'm thinking, or sort of trying to get my head around is, and I guess I'll just put this out to the board. Do you guys feel like this, if we went with a hybrid model AABB, that this would be the model we would go for through January, through the end of the school year, because otherwise, you know, how we start off, we could start off this way and then a month later plan to go to something else, or we could start on one of the other ones, as I think Laura said earlier, and go, you know, maybe it's K2 and 5 go together, go back first. But then again, you know, we're going to end up with parents that are, oh, I've got a 2nd grader and a 5th grader, and you can't do that to me, you know, and I get that too.
Yep. And I think that the reality is we may be in a situation where we may have to phase in, right, to be able to get our newest students, our kindergarten students, maybe students who are new to like Alden, the 3rd graders, to be able to phase them in and get them like routinized into some of the health screening in the morning, the temperature taking, just all of those things that are new for even students that have been in school. But for our kindergartners, they've never had the benefit really of even seeing the building that they're going to be in. So we may have some sort of hybrid phase in before we get to any of the full live in-person models, to be able to have that experience where they're oriented to the building and they're able to learn the routines of how to enter the building. With a smaller population, that's going to be easier to do and easier to teach and reinforce. So being able to start in something like this, I think is wise, but I understand what you're saying. How long is this sustainable without looking at some point to another model where more students are here? And also to John's point before, like the high school at capacity cannot necessarily house all of its students unless we are going to revisit the idea of those large group instructional spaces.
Yeah.
Because I think that does give us a lot of flexibility in the number of students we can bring in.
Okay, so we only have, I mean, and again, you know, this isn't the end of the discussion on hybrid. So we only have about maybe 10 minutes left. You know,
We have some more foils, right? Some more.
yeah, I'm assuming there's, what is there? Oh, yeah, I got this.
Yeah, the other ones are more remote based.
So Laura, in your discussions with other superintendents, what are they saying? I mean, are they, you know, I know there's a few schools that have done the AABB. Are they talking about this for a month? Are they talking about it? They're not sure. They're just going to see how it goes.
I don't know the answer to that, but I do have a superintendent meeting tomorrow, so I will bring that question to them. And I don't know, I think it varies, quite honestly. It's sort of like, is their hybrid successful? And and then when will they start growing it? Are there some hiccups and are they pulling back? So I can sort of ask those questions tomorrow and have them ready.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see, you know, because the more I think about it, it's really this hybrid model, you know, that's like a part-time model or part-time in-class model is only a stepping stone. Not that any of these aren't just stepping stones, but some are bigger stones than other. You know, I mean, you could almost see us getting through the school year in one of those earlier ones. And AABB, you know, and trying and realizing that part of what we're trying to do is get the kids back in class, but part of what we're trying to do is help parents deal with, you know, it's not just a matter of having daycare now, it's a matter of having somebody that is, you know, technically engaged with a child versus watching a child. So I, you know, it's more a matter of figuring out, you know, how much of this do we bite off now and how much do we, you know, do we set a schedule? And I'm assuming the other districts are doing the same thing. You know, it's AABB until December. We think in December, given, as Brian said, nothing changes, you know, we don't get a new calculation. They don't shift social distancing to 4 feet. That then we, you know, assuming there's none of those things, then we go in January, we're going to go to the K to, like, maybe it's this one, and then, whew, yeah.
Yeah, and I had a meeting with the assistant soups from the county today, and there were some conversations about this, and the districts that have the one-to-one devices and synchronous learning models are, not that anyone is not feeling, you know, stressed and overwhelmed by how this is all working and whatever, but I feel like they're in a much better position in whatever model they're currently in and in the projected models that they're moving into in terms of getting their population back. And even some of them were looking at their hybrid models and that the estimates of students that would be coming in on any given day, because some families have opted for full remote, they're actually looking at bringing in additional kids, you know, based into the models, because say they planned for, you know, X number on one day and 40% of those students have opted out on that one particular day. So they're all just going through and feeling their way through it the same way we are. But the one advantage I think we do have in whichever way we go is we do have a lot of space in 3 of our buildings. We do have the one-to-one devices, and you know, I think that's a really big deal. And we also have teachers who have been very responsive and collaborative in working in a synchronous model right now.
Yeah, I mean, I hope everybody understands that, you know, just because we're really pushing to get to these, and I think the parents would agree, just because we're pushing to get kids back to school doesn't mean that every ounce of energy that they've put into remote learning isn't worth 10x what it takes to put it in, because it's at any given moment, if the numbers start to light up in New York State, we could be all full remote in 2 weeks.
Yep.
So
I'd hate to ask this question again, well, to have it done again, because it's this word, but is there any way that maybe we can send another survey out? I'm sorry for the word survey, but a survey out just to get another grasp on who would be sending their kids to school, who would want them remote, or would they do every other day, or whatever the question may be, however you want to word it. Just so, again, we have an idea, because maybe things have changed from the last time the survey was asked. We're getting closer to this time now, and I think it's just something that I think we need to have a better understanding. Again, I know people can change their mind, I get that, but it'll be a little bit closer than maybe what it is prior.
wasn't there a survey like a week ago?
No, I mean like the K through 8, like asking specifically.
There
Like
was
if
there
you're-
was a survey to parents about who would be sending their kids back and who would stay fully remote, and I thought that was like a week ago or 10 days ago.
That was a sports one, which I mean, I'd also like to know, was that sports one sent out, was that just for the high school? I don't know if anybody on this can answer that. Was that just to the high school, or was that also for the middle school as well?
There was a survey sent out, sorry, Rick, but the other, Claudia Perry's talking about the survey that they sent out to see who would feel comfortable quarter by quarter sending their kids back.
And the athletic survey went out to students in grades 7 through 12.
But that was like a week ago, right? Or maybe,
Right.
yeah.
And we thought, we too struggled with the horse and the cart. Like, do we send this out to parents just to see who's going to be remote? But others felt like they didn't have enough information. They wanted to know what the hybrid was to make an informed decision. So if we said K-8 in person, that would be a specific or remote for the older students. That's a separate question. And then another question. So are we looking to do a survey that has every scenario to get who's going to be here and who's going to be remote?
I think you want to pick 3 scenarios. You want to have hybrid. Well, and of course you have the choice of remote full time, and then the in person. One plan for in person. We don't want to send out all these different things.
Well, I think we don't really have a choice through 9 through 12. So even if you send out a survey through K through 8 saying fully remote, a hybrid of 2 days per week, or a 5-day-a-week model, they get 3 options, and it's the people that really are going to be impacted. So you get a good idea, and it's more direct, my opinion.
My only problem with it is, and then we turn around and say, well, we can't really do K through 8 in person because we don't have the money, or we don't, we haven't really figured out which ones. It'd be interesting to find out what plan they'd be interested in, but I don't want to set expectations that that's the one we're going to choose.
Well, you'd have to be picky with your words, because like you said before, I mean, we'd have to fill 36 personnel spots to open up K through 8 if we did it in less than 30 days, which is, it's tough to do. So you can put it back as, what their preference is, and understand this may be a step process, but just to see what most parents are comfortable with as far as a percentage.
Yeah, I just wouldn't get too carried away with, would you send your ninth grader? How about your 10th grader? How about your, just.
Do that.
All right. So, while I'm thinking, with our teachers and our staff, I don't know why this even just came to mind, but what happens if we kick them out, right? A teacher comes in with a fever, and we say, nope, out of here, go get tested or stay home for 10 days. Are they burning sick time doing that? Or are we paying, because we're the ones sort of, and I'm assuming this is probably in the state's, recommendations, but are we, since we're the ones telling them that they're sick, they feel fine, are we how does that work? Do we, like, do they, they have to stay quarantined for 10 days? Does that burns 10 of their sick days?
Well, if they can work remotely, then they can work remotely. If they're sick, so some folks have called in sick, they just can't work remotely. They follow process. They put their absence in Frontline, which is our tool that we use to monitor teacher absences. And then for that day, they would push out work to students that they're not there.
But they can't come back though until they have a negative COVID thing, right?
Mm-hmm. And a doctor's note. Yeah.
Or would they have the ability to teach a classroom from home?
Yes.
Yes.
But it wouldn't necessarily negate the fact that we may need a substitute here for them in some capacity, whether it's a teaching assistant, a monitor, someone to be able to supervise the students who are in their classroom.
Oh yeah, no, I was more, it just has been in and out of my head about, if we make somebody stay home for 10 days to quarantine and they burn through 10 sick days or, 8 sick days, and then it turns out there's nothing wrong with them. That doesn't quite sit very well. Anyway.
And there are aspects of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. It's that was passed and actually only goes till December, but people are able to, for different reasons, avail themselves to portions of their paycheck without regard to sick leave.
Okay.
And we administer that on the HR and payroll side.
All right. So I guess, and I'm not sure who was on when I was mentioning it, but our next formal board meeting, I think, is October 6th. We have the rest of these work sessions should run their course before then. The idea that, that whole list of questions, I think a lot of them have been answered, but that whole list of questions and concerns we submitted, at some point we need to go through those. We really need to think through these models and sort of put together each of our positions on it. And then I think our commitment needs to be to, assuming again that all the questions and concerns have been answered and dealt with, that on that October 6th board meeting, since it's a formal board meeting, we'll vote on which option, and it's, I don't know, as it necessarily has to be a motion, but it needs to be I'll call it some sort of a poll that says this is where we want the district to go.
I think it should be more formal. We are committing money here.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the plan. Is unless somebody has a problem with it, October 6th is when we'll vote on the actual hybrid model. That we will, we can work through the money at some point. But the model itself, we can spend time going through it where there might be money to be moved, again, assuming that we have all the questions and concerns dealt with. And that still gives the district close to a month to, to actually implement.
Hey, Perry, would we narrow it down prior to that point? Because right now there's 7 options on the table.
Yeah. I mean, what we'll do is one of the work sessions, we'll try to, I think, narrow it down. Maybe it even should be the next work session. We'll bring it down to, let's say, 3.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody on the board? So either you're muted or you agree.
Well, I think we need to come up with how, there's 7 of us on the board, and if we're split with 3 models, I vote for this, you vote for that, someone else votes for that, and it might be split. So I think Chris has a point. We just need to either agree on one model that we're going to vote for, or 2 different ones, or if there's too many models, like right now, if we all voted, we could all vote for a different model.
Yeah, no, I'm saying we'll try to bring it down to, three models at the most. And then, and again, I think at some point we're gonna have to sit down and say, I think November 1st, we should go with this model with the target to be on this model, like everybody back. Well, we can't ever bring everybody back until social distancing goes away. So, but I think we can get to this model by February. But the first thing is to go, what does that model look like on November 2nd? I think is the first school day of November.
So you're basically saying it could start out complete hybrid and then in a month K3, K5, K8, or
it could be
somewhere of that. Right.
I think we really need the input of our school administrators on this, on what they think about what's doable and what time frame.
Right. I agree.
So Laura, I mean, can we take a version of this thing and we'll do I think we're gonna have to do our next working session as, continuing this. Take a look at what is physically doable. I mean, hiring 30, hiring.
All right, that's me.
Hiring 33 people in a month, getting them trained and in place. Well, actually 35 people, if you count the custodians, and getting that done in a month is probably impossible. I mean, I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you can hire people in flocks, if that's legitimate or not, but trying to get that many people onboarded in, like I said, a month, doing all the interviews, all that. So what is should it be AABB? Because we can get that done by November 2nd. Now we need to hear what is physically doable from your side.
Yes. So we're saying that we could have a K8 in person, but how we're going to, if that's where we want to go, how we would move it in a sequential manner.
Yeah. I mean, what do you like when you look at these models? I mean, this seems like the least of the full things, of the full models. What can, could this be implemented December 1st?
Yeah, I hear you.
So then what we're recommending is maybe we start with AABB, because we think we could get that done for November 2nd. Or we think we could do the very first one that was presented. It's more about what's doable. And then, then we're going to have to, at the same time, Brian, we're going to need to look at, what's physically or fiscally possible here. If we went AABB for 2 months, that reduces that cost. Then we could go to this full K8 in person, because now all we need is, I don't know, $1 million or an even $1 million for the rest of, for the remaining school year. And then we can put it into the budget for next year, or for the next school year. All right. So why don't we plan to go over that on, what the hell is today? Tuesday?
Hey, Perry, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
And I don't know who this would be for, but seeing as how we are probably going to pick a hybrid no matter what it is, and that they would need to hire, is that something that will start? I mean, not that you guys don't have enough to do, but is that something that can get started now, like the interview process, so that, it might help it along once we have the hybrid model and we're ready to go back?
Well, I think it really depends on, like, if we have conceptual approval for bringing on monitors and aides, but the 7 teaching assistants or 13 teaching assistants, is that where we're going to land? And would we start that search now? There are ones that we can definitely start, but that 13, will require us to say, this is what we're committing to.
Well,
K5,
what
K8.
was the minimum, Laura? Can you go to the one before this?
It's the AABB one, right? Yeah.
So we're talking 2 monitors and, oh, we don't have any.
There's teaching assistants in the middle school and high school.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
that's for the larger.
Yeah, what I was going to try to do is I was going to say, is there some minimum, like, hey, if we can get 3, sorry, can you go forward again? We could get 3, if we could get 3 teaching assistants, or say 2 teaching assistants in Elm, Alden Middle School and high school, that would give us, sort of the best platform. No matter what you guys tell us to do model wise, we would still have that. And maybe it's 1 monitor per building. That's like the first swipe. But we still need to know how much that would cost before we could give you conceptual approval to do.
I don't understand what you're saying, Perry, as an example. I'm lost.
So, there's some number, I think, like is the minimum.
It's the foil prior to this. It's the sheet prior to this, right? That's the, isn't that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but I don't understand. I thought we said there was, oh, I see. I'm sorry. I got this stupid thing over top of my screen here.
So you could say AABB, it's minimal. And then you say K3, you need 7. K5, you'd need 13.
Right.
So that's really the only way to step into the teacher assistants.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, well, that's why I just had my screen covered up, but so if we take the minimum and say, gave them conceptual approval to go forward and get 2 teaching assistants for the middle school, 2 for the high school, 2, and 2 monitors in each school, because, and unless there's anybody on the board that feels comfortable saying, I think we should be remote for the entire year, please don't jump through YouTube at me. Unless there's somebody who says that, we're going to have to do something.
Yeah.
And so if we could start with a minimum hire, what would approximately, Brian? So if you did 2, 4, 6, 8 monitors and 4 teaching assistants, what would that what would that cost us?
About 600 grand.
About 600 grand, and that would be for an entire school year.
Yes, that's annualized.
So maybe it's 500 grand worth of people for
And it's a point, but it's a nuanced point. But know that teaching assistants may become teacher aides. We went with teaching assistants because it makes sense that they're able to provide and do instruction, but they do require a certificate from New York State. So they're going to be harder to find. So we may have to have some level of teaching assistants and some level of teaching aides that are mixed in. But that was more the goal.
So from the board standpoint, and I'll put a number on it. So 8 monitors, 4 teaching assistants, and 2 typist monitors. And that would be whatever Brian just said about, let's say about $600,000 or $500,000. Just go around for the folks that are on, of conceptual approval.
I don't know what you're trying to accomplish by cutting back from what they said here. We
don't know what model we're going to go with. So I'm just talking about like starting the process, because it's probably going to take a while. Even if they said, this is what the ad is going to look like in the paper, and then we're going to send it out, just to get ready for hopefully, getting these kids back.
But
This right here, the staffing, the 19 district wide would get us started in a strong way with a hybrid AABB. We'd have to revisit if we were going to grow in anywhere, if we were going to bring in a whole grade in person, then we would want to say, okay, we need teaching assistants here
Okay,
to
so,
help us.
Right,
so,
this to me is the minimum.
all right, so we're talking 21 employees as the minimum,
19
plus 2 custodians. So,
includes.
so do we, I mean, I'm asking the board, does, you know, what's your take on conceptual approval to go start moving on hiring these people or interviewing and hiring these people?
I mean, I think, you know, if we can get a jump on it, I think it would be helpful. I'm sure everybody's incredibly busy. I know, like, I almost hesitated throwing it out there, but if there's any way to maybe get a jump on it, this might, you know, help us.
All right, the simple question is there anybody on the board that wants to stay remote? And if they don't, then we have to do the hybrid.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't hear anybody say stay remote, so I'm assuming.
Right. Yeah, it's this model. We just got to smooth out any kind of rough edges. That's all, but it's going to happen.
Harry, do you mind if I just jump in around Jennifer's question about the actual process of advertising for the positions, because that would be me who puts that information out there. So if we know that even if we said, okay, the most is going to be this amount of teaching assistants, that's going to be one ad that says we need 13 positions. So, and then, so I can get those pieces together pretty quick. And then just, we wait to see how many we're actually hiring. And then of course it's going to be the interviewing process, but we can turn around the ad piece of it fairly quickly.
I'm not worried about the ad. I'm more worried about getting these folks hired, getting them getting into our district. You know, we have a month and a half, and not even really. We have a month and a week. You know, I'm assuming that if the board gives conceptual approval for these 21 people, that the district's going to go out and hopefully, you know, maybe luckily there's 21 people just waiting. But more than likely, there's probably 5 and then 2 more and then 3 more. And then, you know what I mean? But giving them conceptual approval to go to the level that's on this chart so that, you know, if somehow they luck out and there's monitors just hanging out all over the place, great. Rather than having to wait and come back to us and go, you know, I found another one. Can I have, you know, can I have him or her?
And even to know that, yeah, that we're able to go up to this amount, because again, this was created in the most of ideal situations, given the background that we shared about the monitoring and the concerns about being in the hallway. And hey, it could be true at the end of the day, we don't need as much of this, but to be able to get started it would be helpful for sure.
Plus, it gives us a pool for the future too. I mean, if we're going to need, you know, 17 teacher assistants eventually through K through 8, you know, you want to interview as many people as you can, right? Wasn't that 17? Wasn't that K through 8? Now, how many was the?
34.
No, I'm saying just the teacher assistants. I'm just saying just one. We're going from, you know, 4 teacher assistants to 17. You know, so we need to get that pool of people. Hopefully, we get it over time.
13 K through 8. Yeah.
13.
So let me see. So Chris, you okay with this?
I'm okay.
Claudia?
Yep.
Jen?
Yep.
John, wherever you are.
Yep. This is what it takes to do it, and I'm glad you guys have done a great job trying to make at least a stab at this. Is very good. And by the way, I love it tonight. This was wonderful, wonderful information. The way you put it together, great.
Yep. Helpful. Yeah, the last 2 presentations I thought were our last 2. You know, were very well done, very well organized, and nothing but the facts. Did I miss anybody? Nope. And I'm good. So that's what, 5, I think. So we're good. All right.
Harry, can I just ask something of the principals of the 2 schools? Is there any way that that survey or the information about the sports can be posted onto the website for those parents that may not have gotten it, just so the parents are aware for the sports?
I'm sorry, can you repeat exactly what you want on the website?
No, just, the for the sports.
Yeah, the survey.
Just, yeah, the information, the question, however it was worded, I never saw it.
Sure.
I don't know what it's about. But is there any way that that could be put on the website for parents? If they go on and want to read about it or question it or anything of that sort, can it go on there? I don't know how it was sent out, it's just a
Yes.
follow-up, just
That-
another
that-
place for a parent to look.
Yeah, understood. Okay, so we sent it out to all 7 through 12 students. We also then informed the parents when we informed them about our student orientations. But I'm sure maybe with somebody's help, I'm not as tech savvy as others, but I'm sure we could get something up on both the middle school and high school websites, sure.
You're just looking for the posting of the results?
Oh, I didn't even know you got the results back. I just mean, I mean, I didn't see anything. I've been looking,
We had some good participation. There were over 113 students who filled out the survey.
oh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. So the other thing too is where I guess they would be able to see in the recording, they'll be able to see the presentation that's up, right?
Yes.
Okay. So parents or any taxpayers or anybody actually can go in and see, the options we're wrestling with, the decision we made tonight about starting with that minimal set of staff, getting that underway as quickly as possible. Cheryl, you said there's a comment or a question?
Yeah, and I also wanted to point out, Perry, that this presentation will be on the agenda. So I do agendas for each work session, so anybody can go there and look for the presentation. So we have a comment from Dawn Tompkins. I think it is very important that every student in the district gets into school, that no one group stays remote only moving forward. Emotionally and socially, it is very important. Every student needs to get back into school for at least 2 days if that's what can be done. High school cannot be remote only with the rest of the district in full-time or hybrid. It's not equitable to the high school students. Dawn.
Thanks, Don. Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
I believe we have to allow for full remote because folks can choose that. I believe that's a state. Isn't that a state?
Well, I have to, I think Dawn's comment was, don't just, remote is fine if that's what they choose, but don't have any, don't take 5th and 6th grade and say they're not coming in. Don't take the high school kids and say, I think that's what her comment was more targeted at. And that's the problem. I mean, if in every aspect for us to get back to normal, they all have to be in school. And right now there's no physical way for us to do it. So do we, sort of peanut butter spread the fairness here, or do we start with the little ones and work our way up? It's a decision we're going to have to make.
Well, based on her question though, even if we went the K-8 model, the high school is still 2 days a week.
Yeah. But
so I mean, that would appease the question that she had asked. But
Yeah, she might mean that one model where none of the high schoolers would go, except for students with disabilities.
Yeah, we're going to still need to do some figuring. We're still going to need to figure out, are these physically possible by November 2nd? Which models are physically possible? If none of them, or maybe one of them is physically possible, then okay, so that's the one we have to go with November 2nd, or we just can't do it for another month, which I think would, everybody would lose their minds. And
I mean, if you really want to step it back, you can go AABB for K through 3, and then AABB for, I mean, that's instead of keeping everyone remote, but hopefully that's not the case.
Exactly. So, all right. Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Just,
try, Claudia. You always get me.
Always you and I. It's always you and I.
I just, before, this, after you second, it's the comment period. I just wanted to say thank you, guys.
Yes.
I know we have put you through hell. I know we have, been just trying our best, but you guys have really stepped up. Like I said, especially the last two that just sort of really led the story. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
And let us know, Laura, if you can, what the superintendents, what
Yeah.
their thoughts are on these models rolling out over time.
Yep, and we'll work on a survey as well.
All right, and we'll see you all.